Camping among the ruins at Negwegon State Park. Winter is breathing its last breath, hopefully. I look out the window right now and a mix of snow and sleet, and my mind goes to thoughts of camping, one of my very favorite activities. Both spring, summer, and fall camping is the best. Never cared a whole great deal for winter camping. But here in Michigan, there are no limits on places to indulge this pastime. It does not matter if you enjoy camping with most of the comforts of home or roughing it under the stars. There is just nothing else like it to get closer to God's amazing creation. I have, of course, favorite memories of very special camping adventures. Number one is of a day and a half at what is now Negwegon State Park, just south of Alpena on Lake Huron shoreline. If you want remote solitude, a finer spot is not found. Now, camping is no longer allowed in this area. This was probably over 30 years ago now. Oh my God, that's hard to believe. But anyways, Negwegon State Park is special for many reasons, but probably the most significant for those of us that are prehistorically minded are the stoneworks located there. What? You have never heard of them? And that's not surprising, as not a whole lot has been written about them. They are in a sheltered and unmarked area and are basically stone pits and fences that archaeologists believe may have been built as many as 5,000 years ago, which would put them in the middle to late Archaic period. The relics of the past may actually not even be Indian creations. Many people speculate that they may have been constructed by early Norse visitors to Michigan, and there is considerable evidence to support that the Nordic people had been in Michigan in ancient times. Check out the book Michigan Prehistory Mysteries by Betty Sodders. There is a well-written primer for the alternate side of Michigan archaeology. Let us get back, though, to camping. My friend Howie and I had been trying for a couple months to get a day off at the same time so we could hike into the stoneworks and camp. Finally, mid-August, our chance arrived, and we seized the opportunity. We were going to be able to spend one night and a day. It was a Friday afternoon, and we drove over to Black River. There was no trail leading back into the park yet, so I parked my truck at a friend's house, and Howie and I were about to become trailblazers. I had only been to the ruins one other time, and I hoped I'd be able to find them again. We both strapped on our backpacks, which were the large economy size, and they felt like it too. Our tent and a few other supplies, such as a cooler, we put on a crude skid with a rope for pulling it and started out into the woods. The hike in from Black River was about 4 miles. Nowadays, the addition of a road in the parking and a parking lot cut the hike down to maybe a mile and a half. And additionally, now there's a nicely groomed trail heading north into the park, but not so back in the day. We made our way over what was at times most trying terrain. And what added to the annoyance of constantly swatting at hordes of hungry mosquitoes was Howie asking every 10 minutes, "Are you sure you know the way, Dan? Are you sure you know the way? Are you sure you can find the stoneworks again?" And my favorite, "They're going to find your dead body out here if this is a wild goose chase." However, I knew where I was going. Well, sort of. The heat made the hike more than a little uncomfortable, but we were guys, rough and tough, and out after adventure, not a cushy time. By 5:30, I was ready for a cushy time. I was hot, sweating, and still battling the ever-increasing number of skeeters. But undaunted, we continued, veering east so we could meet the Lake Huron shore and pause there for a few moments. Ah, Lake Huron. It looked so cool and so refreshing, lapping against the sand and rocks like a savory mirage in a dry desert. And I hit the beach, stripped off my backpack, shirt, and shoes, and I stopped there due to modesty, and then bounded into the cool, restorative waters. And just a short ways behind, Howie followed suit with much less modesty, I must unfortunately say, than I displayed. After a while, we continued on north along the shore and then crossed back over into the forest when I figured that we should. And I was correct, as right before you come upon the stoneworks, there's a large uncharacteristic clearing in the woods. I think it must cover about 3 acres of land, and there is absolutely no apparent reason for the clearing to be there. And I've heard rumors that back prior to the Civil War, an escaped slave named Nigger Marshall lived there with his wife and daughter. It has been suggested that the clearing was his homestead, but like the woods around it, it should have grown back up over the years. Another possibility is that this is where there was a stagecoach stop on the way north long before US 23 or even railroads traveled this far up into Michigan. And I am told that the lakeshore road, skirted very tight to the lakeshore right at this particular spot. Howie and I actually stumbled across some relics that might support either of these possibilities. There was a windfall tree, and in the roots we found several coffin whiskey flasks and other antique bottles. Their shape has garnered this name for them. They were shaped similar to an old-fashioned coffin. And we were able to deduce by the method of manufacture that the bottles dated back to the 1860s, 1870s era. At the north end of the clearing was a trail leading still further north. Just a ways up is another small clearing on the west side. And this is actually an orchard planted, who knows when or by whom. This could have been part of Nigger Marshall's homestead. And just beyond the orchard at the south end are the enigmatic stone pits. After looking at the pits, Howie and I decided to pitch our tent right away and right there beside them. We wanted to do a little exploring before dark, and it was already after 8, so we quickly went about setting up our temporary base. I tackled setting up the tent while Howie cleared an area for a small campfire and collected some of the abundant dry branches. Dusk was coming on fast, so before fixing grub we took a look around. The pits are stone-lined and about 5 feet deep. The stones are set in place without the benefit of mortar or any binding material. It is easy to visualize these as having been used for storage of some important commodity. The stone fences, as they have come to be called, are long piles of stone meandering with what appears to have been a haphazard design. Every now and then is a break in the fence where it is assumed there may have been a gate. Some who are expert in the field have suggested that the rows were a base for wooden palisades that would have built up a sort of fortified wall, perhaps for defensive reasons. As dark finally fell, we were both exhausted by what had been a really exciting but tiring day. We had prayer around the campfire and a brief devotion time, and then hit the sleeping bags. I was ready for a good sound sleep in the fresh outdoors, but then the best laid plans often go astray, and they did indeed that night. Even at its worst, camping is awesome. Have you ever tried to sleep in a small dome tent with someone whose snoring sounds just like a jet breaking the sound barrier? I tried it, and no matter how tired I was, it just was not possible to get to sleep. So around 1:30 in the morning, I opened the tent flap and situated my sleeping bag so I could lay there and look outside. Despite the noise from Howie, whose snoring was now accompanied by a crescendo courtesy of the beans that he had consumed earlier, the scenery at night was nothing less than awe-inspiring and made me feel humble before my Creator. I uttered a quiet thank you. Just past the ancient pits, a heavy veil of fog hung over the orchard. Behind the tent, towards the swampy area, I could hear the sound of what must have been a million frogs singing their precious chorus, a song of praise to our Father. Hoot owls called back and forth, and a coyote yipped someplace in the distance. I turned on my back and looked up at the zillions of stars. Nothing makes me feel as little as that. Small, but safe, because it was not difficult for me to imagine that as a sparkling blanket which God had lovingly laid out over his children to protect them, me, that night. I finally did fall asleep, feeling truly like I was resting in my Father's tender arms. And then finally came morning. We ate and talked and did a little more exploring. Unfortunately, by late afternoon, we had to break up our little camp and head back out of the wonders of the Michigan pine forest. I have often returned to visit the stoneworks to sit and speculate on who made them, and when, and why. But I am no closer to knowing the truth, but in a world where so many of the age's great questions have been answered, truly, it is a delight to know that there are still some mysteries left to solve.